Yeah.
Okay, now it's being recorded again. Okay.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was aware of that. It's just I'm not in control of this because
finding the recording gone back, I think, when I left the meeting.
It stopped and apparently one of the students says it's restarted, but as I say, I'm not in control of any of that.
Okay, you know what? I won't leave this and I will just mute and I will just stay and just go ahead. That's
okay. Fine. All right. Okay. Sorry about that, guys. Let's just recap the aims. So we're going to look at how parents have been reconceptualized as parents on their own children. This is relatively a new phenomenon. We're going to look at some practical examples of parent-teacher partnerships and learn how parents in the classroom can enhance the learning and the teaching experience or the pedagogy of young children. And those are children in our early years field up to 8 years of age. So let's go back in time, a little bit of political background, basically. And this goes back to the time 1997 in the Labour government under Tony Blair. Really kick-started this phenomenon of looking at investment in early childhood education and care. And it was regarded as a cost-effective way of ensuring benefits to society in the long term. In other words, dealing and preparing our children in the early years and spending money on that foundation, as it were, will pay benefits. It will pay dues in later years, and children will thrive going through the education system and then become productive citizens. And that's intentionally, that's what we are. We're trying to turn out turn out children who are going to be productive members of society. So this was quite a new phenomenon back in the 1997, where this idea of investing early on was a costly endeavour. But the idea was to spend money in the early years so that later on we're less involved in remedial costs and trying to pull children forward as they go through their primary and secondary phases and maybe have some struggles. So it was part of a worldwide agenda of social justice, okay, seeking to support the youngest children from underprivileged families in particular, which is where the Labour ethos comes in, the Labour agenda came in, particularly for underprivileged families. More recently, there has been a concept of upward mobility where parents are now clearly aware, and successive governments are making parents clearly aware of the need for economic and social mobility for their children. As you know, all parents, whatever their political persuasion, all parents want the best for their kids and want them to do better than themselves. So for these reasons, the idea of strong partnerships with schools and families has played a key role in policy making and practice. This is where the politics and the practice come together. So this new idea of the parent as expert on their own child. Back in the day, it was the case of the teacher or the practitioner being the expert and advising the parent, giving them their professional advice. And it sounds a little bit condescending, really, when you think about it. If you're a parent and you've got a child, you know that child better than everybody. That child is part of you. So there's this move away from the practitioner or the teacher being the expert and kind of trying to tell the parent what is best for them and their children. So there's become this more dialogic approach where there is this back and forth between the parents and the teacher or the practitioner in developing a dialogue, in developing a useful conversation that is going to be beneficial to the child in early years and Key Stage 1, for example. It acknowledges and respects the parent again, and it listens to the parent. Not all parents are the same. They're not one homogenous group. Parents come in every shade, in every colour, in every political persuasion, from every religious background. Where they're not homogenous group, it's not just one monolithic group. They are very different individuals, and they're human beings with their own very personal lived experiences. So this encourages their input in what goes on at their setting, so that they have something to say about what goes on in the practice that is going to impact their own child's life. So getting parents involved and getting them on board in the UK. As I've just said, not all parents are the same. Not all parents are confident. Not all parents are educated to the point that they feel that they can help their children out with their learning. Some people are. Some people are very well educated. They've been through the education system. They know the rules of the game. They know how it works and can pass on that knowledge and that learning disposition to the children. But it's not the same for everybody. So where there are nuances and where there are differences, and particularly where there are families who have children with special educational needs, for example, or disadvantages or challenges of other kinds, then guidance has been built into policy. So one example of this is a recent launch of the Hungry Little Minds initiative from the UK government, which aims to help parents who maybe don't understand the curriculum. It's a long time since they've been to school. Well, it enables them to understand the power and the importance of play, for example, which we all know the value of, studying it in very much depth, but in the importance of learning through play from birth through to 5 years, for example. And this program, this initiative, gives guidance on developing the cognitive or the intellectual, the language and the communication skills that are the bedrock of future learning for young children. Here's another example. The Education People in Kent, right in the southeast of your map there. The Education People provides a toolkit for providers and schools and nurseries to balance and audit the strengths and the ethos of encouraging parents to engage with their children's learning in order for them to understand. Lots and lots of things come into play here. So this program is there to help parents understand children's learning dispositions and how modeling good learning dispositions enables the children to take on board what the parents want them to do. It also involves educating parents about children's schemas, those little kind of shortcuts and learning journeys that children go on, whether they're moving things from A to B or carrying things or collecting things or stacking things. It gives the parents a little bit of an idea about what to expect from very young children in their play. And the fact that, you know, if a child goes around the room collecting everything from Lego bricks to mummy's purse and mummy's perfume and putting it all in a box and wheeling it around the living room, there is a reason for that and it's acceptable. So it kind of primes parents as to what to expect in the play and the behaviours of their very young children. It also enables them to understand how children behave in their home environment. And this is absolutely key. The home learning environment is the place where this early teaching gets started regarding, for example, the parent, not only as the expert on their own child, but the child's first teacher. So this home learning environment that we want to engage with has to be, or is encouraged to be, as stimulating and as child-friendly and as encouraging as possible. They also provide a strategies booklet, which checks what parents are able to do. Doesn't check, a lot of assessments do, what people are not able to do, with crosses alongside, you know, check boxes that say they're not able to do this yet, they can't do that, they're no good at this. It's much more positive. It's what's called a strengths-based or a non-deficit-based model of checking what parenting can bring to the discussion, what skills they do have, what learning and understanding they do have. And that covers all races and all ethnicities and all diversities and all challenges, whatever that may be. It's regarded as something that parents can bring to the table as a positive, rather than a tick list that says, well, parent A is not able to do this, they're struggling with that, and they need help doing this. It's much more positive. It starts from the positive inputs and the positive strengths of parents who maybe don't even realize they've got strengths. And then, of course, a digital smart play app that allows parents to record play and learning moments, given that a lot of our parents now are possibly millennials with, you know, access to some digital devices and knowledge of how that device works. Again, it plays to their strengths as that generation who can do with computers and digital devices and so on. Now, this example is at the other end of the spectrum, shall we say, okay? The first example I gave you played to people and parents who maybe did not have the confidences to express their skills as well they might. This is another example, but it's from a private Montessori day nursery called High House. It's in the south of the country near Stansted Airport, but as it says in the title, private Montessori day nursery does imply that this is aimed at parents who can afford private daycare. So there's a switch here in emphasis and a switch in terms of the cohort or the demographic that is going to be using this daycare centre. And I've chosen this one because, as you can see at the bottom of bullet points here, its Ofsted rated is outstanding. In other words, it's a very, very good example of positive, good practice in terms of the early years at nursery level. So this is one that I really want you to focus on when you come to your own personal reading, for example. It might be helpful to look at this as a good example too. So what it offers is actually not just a Montessori method which sees the child at the centre of their play, but a fusion of Montessori, Italian Reggio Emilia, and the Scandinavian forest schools. So it's a fusion, it's pulling from the best practice from around the world, which is to be, commended, and also the British Early Years Foundation scheme. So early years foundation stage curriculum as well from the DFE. So it's a fusion of all this really good positive practice to enable children to flourish and develop their potential, which is at the end of the day what we want them to do. We want them to get through Maslow's hierarchy of needs and then be able to flourish and reach that period or that tip of the pyramid in terms of their potential. So it's based in a rural farmhouse location, so it's a beautiful setting. The children are welcomed as competent, unique individuals, capable of great things, which is very Montessorian in approach. And it takes children from 3 months to 4 years, so very early on in their childhood. And the children's learning proceeds in partnership with the parents whose contributions are very much valued. So again, it's re-emphasizing this two-way street, this dynamic between the parents and the practitioners. There's that parent-practitioner dyad, which is very important in terms of doing the best for the children. It opens at 7:45 till 6 p.m. throughout the year. Again, very much meeting the needs of working parents who don't want a 9 till 5. They want something a little bit longer so that it accommodates their working hours. And as I said, it is an example of excellent practice, which you might find at the end in the reference lists. So going forward on this High House process or High House ethos, starting at nursery, the parents complete an all about me pack to inform the staff of the children's needs and interests. So the minute those children go into that school, they are welcome, they are received, and the school makes itself ready for the child. Okay, so it's more than being school ready. It's more than the child being made ready for school. In this instance, the nursery makes itself ready for the child by getting in advance all the information they need about the child's interests, any challenges, the family makeup, whether they've got any special needs, and so on and so forth. So they are ready to take on board that new child. Key person is a very important part of this ethos, which involves an individual being made responsible for communicating with parents on all aspects of that individual child's experience. And there is this back and forth communication between the key person and the parents via this learning journal, which is like a to and fro book, so that the parents can jot things down, the teachers can jot things down, and this information book is passed between parents and tutors or practitioners, so that they are fully informed of how the child is progressing throughout their early education, as it were, their early daycare experience. So this information is shared. It's very important that the information is shared for the learning and development of the child. And it harks back to the triangle of care in terms of the key person, the child, and the parent being involved in this reciprocal relationship where everybody is involved in the process of educating and developing that child. So you've got your three-way triangle of care there. Communication is very, very important, and it goes beyond the key person and the practitioners and the head teacher. There is a daily whiteboard of information. There are newsletters. There are Facebook pages that keep parents well informed so that they know what's going on, what's required of them, and how they can perhaps help in any of the teaching and learning that goes on. So, for example, the daily whiteboard information might include things like, we're looking for parents to help come and share books at story time. The parents are fully involved, the parents are fully informed and can make arrangements if they wish to help out in that way. Parents' evenings, well, they were abandoned. And they've now got a more flexible approach to suit, again, those parents' working hours, which involves more parents taking it on board and taking up the opportunity to go and speak with the practitioner, because it's more flexible. They can go when it suits them, rather than Thursday evening between 6 and 9, we will be holding a parents' evening at which we'd like you to attend. So it is much more flexible and more parent friendly. There are special events, Father's Day breakfast, for example, a stay and play opportunity for parents to come in and see what goes on in the daycare centre and look at the ways that children are learning, which is, massively different to how they were taught as children themselves. So they will learn an awful lot about what goes on in the classroom. It includes all parents. And it meets the challenges of family circumstances. So, for example, if there are families going through personal crises, perhaps they've had a family breakup, perhaps they've had an illness diagnosed, or perhaps they have just had a diagnosis of a special need and they're not sure how to deal with it, then this High House offers a nice, comfortable space that welcomes them to come and discuss in private what is out there, what support is out there, what agency is out there to help them. And again, the special needs coordinator on board will have access to that space, that comfortable space to hold parent review meetings, for example, with an ed psychologist. Again, they are very family diverse friendly, and so they are there to encourage any family who comes on board with their children to share their own language, and they encourage, for example, stories to be read and translated into families who have an additional language or a first language that is other than the English language, so that the language and the cultural traditions and diverse communities and festivals and so on and so forth are all encouraged and celebrated in an ongoing way, rather than just having, as in many schools that are white, for example, where you might have a block of teaching that celebrates festivals around the world, for example. This nursery is actually living it, and therefore whenever a child has a special celebration or a festival that they want to share, it becomes part of the diverse curriculum, because the communities are diverse, and it's only fair that everybody is made welcome. And we don't just stick to, for example, to Easter and Christmas celebrations, for example. Home learning is very, very important to this particular school ethos, and they provide learning sacks and story sacks as a way of developing and consolidating the learning that goes on in class. The parents are allowed to take home resources so that they can consolidate and develop that learning or extend that learning at home. So, for example, if you're not familiar with the idea of a learning or a story sack, it might be learning based on, for example, the theme of a story for a week. So, for example, let's say the story was The Three Little Pigs. The story sack will include editions of the book. It will include probably soft toys and puppets relating to the story. And it will also include some follow-up activities, maybe jigsaws or puzzles or flashcards with keywords and characters on, so that there's lots and lots of follow-up activities that the parent can learn alongside the child. And usually the story stack includes a little kind of guidance card as well, so the parents know exactly what to take from the story beyond just reading the story, you know, opportunities for discussion, for example. And the same goes for numeracy and things like that. Activity or learning sacks can be created so that children can learn their numbers, they can learn how to match numbers, they can learn the numerals, they can learn how to sequence numbers in order. So these little activity packs are provided so that parents who feel that their child is struggling can take those home and consolidate that learning, or indeed extend that learning back at home. And again, it might be, you know, maybe there's a new baby in the house, or maybe there's a hospital visit due, or maybe there's a toilet training exercise that children are coping or not coping with very well. Then the resources and books and stories and materials and equipment can be sent home so that this can be consolidated and again developed in the comfort of the home with the parent as well. Now, this also relates to this idea. It's a very sort of sociological or philosophical idea of cultural capital. And in a lot of your reading at the moment, when you're reading about children, you're probably coming across this term, cultural capital, which is a sociological term that dates back to the 1970s by a French sociologist called Pierre Bourdieu. And basically, cultural capital are the resources and the means and the access to the resources and opportunities and experiences that we are able to access to get through life, to become educated, to become citizens, to become productive, working people, as it were, right the way through our lives. Now, cultural capital relating to the early years and the early schooling relates to giving the child the best possible foundation in those early years in terms of the basics, the numbers, the counting, the literacy, the ABCs, the phonics, the very, very basic learning concepts, but also the learning dispositions, that independence that we want children to have, to be able to put on their own coat, to be able to tie their shoes or fix their Velcro on their shoes. All those basic self-management skills, as well as some basic learning, can be developed via cultural capital. And that might mean parents taking on board maybe visits to the library, going to museums, going out into forest areas to do some learning there. It's this whole access to resources. But as we said before, access to some of these resources can very often involve economic cost. So those parents, for example, those parents using the Montessori daycare centre that we're talking about, have got economic capital. They find it easy to book a trip to a museum or go to a gallery or have lots and lots of good quality books at home, whereas disadvantaged families and families who are on the breadline don't have access to the same cultural capital. So therefore, that's where we as practitioners and schools come into play, because we can help support parents make the best they can for their children, and so develop that understanding and learning so that they do develop into independent and enjoy a smooth transition to each and every phase of their education so that they too can achieve success. So it's a very broad concept, but in terms of the early years, it's doing the best by the children and providing them with those fun learning activities. Now, of course, when we come to parents in the classroom, it's not just a case of opening up the door and letting them come in and help out because, you know, they're interested in their own child. They must clearly, as volunteers, have their disclosure and barring service certificate, just as you will need when you go into any daycare or early years setting, in the interests of safeguarding and child safety. So that's a given. Parents' skills can be used in many, many ways. I'm just going to run through a few ideas now with you. Very often, you're probably familiar with this idea of parents coming into school, listening to children read and talking through, having this dialogic approach to reading where they talk to the children about their reading, not just listening to how clearly they read or how fluently they read, but they stop and they talk to the children. What do you think is going to happen next? Why do you think that character did this? How do you think you'd feel in that situation? So there's this dialogic approach to reading, which involves lots of discussion to develop the children's comprehension and their language skills. So it's a time to share favourite stories, talk about the character, the plot, the character's motive, and also enjoy reading, not just see reading and books as a mechanical skill, but to take pleasure in reading or reading back or sharing or talking about our favourite stories. Here we've got parents who come into school. I had examples in my school where we had a really good potter, and she came into school and she gave the children the opportunity to make a mural for the school, and they all had a little square tile about 5 inch by 5 inch, and they created their own kind of personalized tile which was glazed and made into this wonderful wall-sized kind of mural as a welcoming resource and a welcoming feature at the entrance of the school. So parents can come in and share those skills in terms of what they can offer. It might be gardening, it might be art, it might be drawing, it might be a range of skills that they developed that they want to come in and share just for the heck of it, just for the fun of it. And children respond well because they love the novelty of a new face. Oh my goodness, it's Philippa's mummy's coming in today, and they get really excited about this rather than the same old with the practitioner and the teacher. Again, parents who are good at gardening might come into school to help with gardening, but there's more than gardening skills being used here. As you can see, there's opportunities here for knowledge and understanding about how plants and seeds grow. The children are developing language, they're developing problem solving, they're developing social skills, they're working together, they're sharing equipment and skills and toys, resources and tools, for example, and they're talking through what they're doing all the time and internalizing that learning. And they're outdoors, they're getting the fresh air, they're really enjoying a different learning context rather than simply pencil and paper learning in the classroom and death by worksheet, for want of a better word. Sorry about that, guys. So again, this idea of stay and play, invitations for dads especially who tend to be working, all hours of the day and going on business trips and so on and so forth, or parents who may be, the father may be the main carer at home. The invitation is there to come and stay and play and engage with their children in the classroom setting rather than at home. What are the benefits of this? Clearly, the parent is knowing exactly how their own child engages and socializes with other children that maybe they're not familiar with. They learn how the teachers and the practitioners teach their children, how they engage with adults in different areas of the classroom, and how they work indoors and outdoors. So then it's an opportunity for both the child and, just as importantly, parents to learn about what's going on there. This is an interesting one because very often we have parents coming in as experts on their employment, for example, on their role in the working world. So, for example, cabin crew have been known to come into our school when we were doing people who help us. Cabin crew would come in and they would bring a whole host of resources. There would be samples of uniforms, there would be equipment, there would be pull down masks from the cabin, and all sorts of discussion about their job. Equally so, nurses and firefighters, trips to or having firefighters come with their engines to the school were great opportunities for real learning about real life. And of course, the visit from the dental practitioners, whether that be the nurse or the dentist themselves, and they would again share their expertise, share their experiences. And then, as you can see in the top right-hand corner here, lots and lots of follow-up activities where the children are invited. For example, we used to set up an airport in our classroom, but the children would be involved in that. It was no good us as practitioners setting up the role play area for them on a Thursday night and giving them a wonderful surprise on the Friday morning when myself and my teaching assistant or my nursery nurse would have set it all up for them on the Friday morning. They wouldn't be interested. They've had no ownership. So the idea is to get the kids on board and ask them, what do you think we should make in the role play area? We've got our home corner. Let's think about holidays and our people who help us. What about an airport? What do you think we might need for that? Or somebody else might suggest, well, can we make an aeroplane deck so that we can see all the equipment and have the seating arrangement, the cabin crew coming up and down with the various drinks and perfumes? We want to do that for our role play. But again, the key important thing is using the parents' expertise and following it up by asking the children to take ownership of what they would like. And in that way, you'll find that they'll be far, far more engaged in the follow-up activities, whether it's speaking and learning or designing or making or organising or problem solving or writing using clipboards to, check in and so on and so forth at the airport. There's a whole host of real life, real activity that the children can model based on what they've been taught by the expertise of the parents in class. So those just give you 3 or 4 different examples of how parents and their own working lives can be used to create new learning opportunities for children, and again validating that relationship between both parents and their children in class. However, very often there can be issues, bringing parents into class. If you think about it, if you've got, little Johnny and dad's coming in to do some computer work, there is potential for that kid to act out because he's being a bit silly because his daddy's coming. So parents need to think about which classrooms they're going to enter. Are they going to support their own children's learning? Are they going to support children further up the school or further down the school, so that there isn't that kind of conflict of interest? And if they know their children is going to, their child is going to react negatively or might get a bit silly, then they might think about that. Or, of course, they can prime their children in advance and say, look, daddy's coming into school tomorrow to talk about gardening outside. If I'm in your class with 30 other children, you've got to remember, Philip, I'm coming to help you all and I don't want you to get silly. So it can be worked around, but these are just some of those challenges that you might find. It's not all a bed of roses. We're talking about human beings, we're talking about little ones, we're talking about practitioners and professionals, but we're also talking about the expertise and the learning and understanding of parents as well. So it's a very, very useful resource to enable parents to come and help us. By doing so, they learn a lot from how we work in class as well. Now, the following slides are just a couple of reference slides, and there's 2 in particular that I want you to really pay attention to, and they're in emboldened text. So you'll see this Department for Education Development Matters non-statutory curriculum guidance is an updated version on what practitioners can do to support children's learning right the way through from birth to, age 60 months, for example. So do have a look at that in terms of what activities you might want to do with children to develop their learning with parents. And also on the second reference sheet here, this Paulette Luff book here. It's a really super, as you can see, very contemporary, very current, very new, very modern text on partnership with parents in early childhood settings. And a lot of what I've been discussing with you this morning is based on that text in the UK context. So you might want to look at the European countries that are also included in there, if that's, you know, if that's your wish. Okay, now I am going to hang about for Pinar and yourselves. If there's any questions that anybody wants to ask, quite happy to respond to any questions. I hope that's been helpful in terms of you understanding, you know, the key resource that parents can be as partners in the classroom, particularly in the early years, and that key stage 1 period where you've got children up to 7, 8 years of age. Okay. Okay, we have a question. Oh, thank you. Thanks very much. I do hope it was helpful. I think it's interesting to see things in practice rather than simply just from a theoretical point of view. You know, I think you can see where the Bourdieu and the cultural capital element fits in there. I think you can relate it also to your Maslow and that hierarchy of needs, but also Bronfenbrenner as well, because of course, parents as partners in the classroom is all about that meso level, isn't it? You know, beyond the family and the home learning environment. So you've got a bit of Bronfenbrenner there in terms of, you know, experiencing beyond the home and into the classroom and community environment. Thank you. That's very kind, Nicole. It's nice to see you again. I recognise quite a number of names from previous years and also from covering for Zoe a couple of months back. So it's lovely to see your names up on screen there. I hope that was helpful. I don't know if Pinar wants to say anything in terms of where we are. If there's any questions whatsoever, I'm more than happy to respond. You can do it via the chat button if you like, or you can ask me personally. It doesn't really matter. Or you can drop me an email afterwards. You all know my email, kerl@hope.ac.uk. So if there was anything that isn't quite as clear as you'd like it to be, but as I say, those 2 key resources and those references at the back will all feed into this same phenomenon of working with parents in a democratic way as well. Let's not forget, you know, when we've moved well away from, you know, teacher being the expert and parents having to do, you know, be told what to do. It's much more democratic and equal, excuse me, an equitable relationship, excuse me. Any questions? No. Okay.
Hi, Linda. Is it finished? Shall I stop the recording?
Yes, I'm finished. I don't know whether the recording stopped.
Sorry.
I think
there's
a recording button still flashing. There's a red recording button flashing on my screen.
Say it again. Sorry, I wasn't able to hear you. Can you?
Sorry, Pinar. There is a red recording button still flashing on the screen as you're speaking.
Yeah, sure. I'm stopping.